If you're married, it's inevitable that likely one of the two of you is going to be the one that manages the finances. Well, what if in the awful circumstances, the individual that managed the finances passes away early, and now suddenly you're left to manage the finances and make some big decisions? How do you do that? We're going to get into that and more coming up. Welcome back to a bonus episode of the Wise Money Show, where we dive into a financial topic or a financial question from a fan of the show, all with one of the expert financial planners here on the Korhorn Financial Group team. My name is Mike Bernard. I am your host, and with me back into the studio here is financial planner Amy Masters. Amy is one of the certified financial planners on our team. She has been on the team for over a decade and serves, somewhere between 100, 200 relationships and is really an expert in all trades. She is a graduate of Purdue University, married to Austin. They've got 3 kids, live in Granger. Amy, welcome back into the studio.
Thanks for having me back, Mike.
Yeah, don't be surprised by that. No. All right, so last time Amy was in, if you missed it, we were talking about how to financially thrive when you're starting a family or having a family. And Amy, Cindy and I have 3 kids. Amy and Austin, they just added twins to the family. And so if that applies to you, make sure you check out that content right here on the Wise Money Show. However, we can take a hard left turn, right? We've got a tough topic today. And it's coming from a question from fan of the show, and there's really no easy way to get into it. And even if you say this doesn't apply to me right now, sadly, it's one of those major life transitions that many people will experience, and you do want to have some forethought or be prepared financially if you do encounter this. So let's get into the questions. It's from a fan of the show, Lori. My husband passed away last year. I'm 58 years old. He managed the finances. I just got my taxes done, and I got a refund, but I haven't done much else, and I'm not sure what steps I need to take. Where do I start? Amy, some initial thoughts on this heavy situation in question.
Yeah, well, first of all, Lori, thank you for reaching out. I'm sure, at least in my experience with working with other people who have lost a spouse, that might have taken a lot of courage to do so, especially if the finances aren't necessarily the thing that you either enjoy working up on, dealing with. Sometimes it can be a pretty big leap to even reach out with a question. So Thank you for reaching out. You're not alone. I have quite a few clients this past year even that I've been walking through this with. And I think it's really important to remember not to rush into any big decisions. So I'm glad you reached out, but know that big decisions we don't necessarily need to worry about. Now, that doesn't mean there's not small things that we need to start already taking action on. And that's where, again, reaching out, we'll talk through some of those things here shortly.
There's a workshop that I did earlier in my career, a book by, I can't remember the author, but the principle was Sudden Money. And this is not that, but I think the same first action item and perspective is appropriate. And that is, if you're an athlete or an entertainer, all of a sudden have a lot of resources at your disposal, the number one advice is to not make any big decisions for at least a year. And this is why I'm a hockey fan. This is why a lot of guys that make it to the NHL and sign the big contract, they end up living with a teammate for the first year or so. They don't want to rush in and buy a house. They don't want to make any big financial decisions. That's really important. But the same thing is true on the other side, not sudden money, but suddenly single. Don't make any huge decisions. There's likely some big ones that you're going to need to decide on. Don't rush into those. Okay, I want to go in reverse order here. There's something that Lori mentioned in her question that maybe is subtle and could be overlooked. But she said, I haven't done much else. I got my taxes done. I haven't really done much else. I think this is very normal, but it also can be problematic.
So the very first thing I would be curious on is, how much does Lori have information on yet? Because sometimes when I've met with someone for the first time after losing a spouse, they have a binder with all of the account statements and know all the details. Maybe they weren't part of setting up the accounts and knowing all the details of everything, but they at least have that information.
There was structure to it. They knew where to go to find.
That's right. And I've also had the complete opposite, where someone has come to me and they don't even know where they all had bank account dollars at, or
Right.
what retirement accounts were out there. And so in my mind, that's the very first thing that we need to do is take inventory of what assets, what liabilities are there. Same from not just a balance sheet perspective of assets, liabilities, but also just what is coming in from an income standpoint, what
Yeah.
expenses are there. Again, Lori might already have some of that figured out, or she might not yet. And so that would be, in my mind, the very first step is just getting our arms around what all is going on.
To add a little levity to the conversation, to a very heavy conversation, it makes me think of comedian Nate Bargatze talking about where he banks. Have you seen this? Oh, it's just absolutely hilarious. But this guy is like a superstar now, stand-up comic, and he has a bit about where he actually doesn't know where they even bank and where the money is. And so he wanders into banks and is like, "Do you have my money?" And like tries to get clues. And as funny as that is, we do often see that problem manifest itself when someone passes. Now, this could be a spouse passing away, but it also could be a parent passing away, and all of a sudden you're responsible as the executor or trustee to figure things out. And like, where's the inventory? So there's 6 areas to your financial life, and they're all interrelated. This is when we talk about comprehensive financial planning, or one plan. That's what we mean. There's 6 areas. You need to attend to all of them. In your present financial position, yeah, that's the inventory. That you're going to have a working and living, breathing balance sheet or net worth statement, not to be bragging about, well, what do the numbers say, but just to have clarity, where am I, right? And so critically important, that would be a first step.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's some simplifying that can be done too, especially if Lori, she's now responsible for handling the day-to-day to the finances, whether she's excited about that or not. Maybe we can simplify things or make it a system that works for her, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times when I work with 2 spouses, even if they're both involved, one spouse has, strong opinions of like, this is how we should run the finances, and it makes sense in my brain, doesn't necessarily make sense in the other spouse's brain. So we need to make sure we take that inventory, but also get a system put in place that makes sense for Lori.
Okay, that's a good segue into the second thing that, before we get into the meat of it. But yeah, she mentioned that she didn't manage the finances. Her husband that passed away is the one that managed the finances. And this is also a very common thing in our household. I manage the finances, and Cindy, when she can't sleep at night, asks me to talk to her about it. Because it's just boring to her. She just doesn't care, about all those details. And so, yeah, truly, she'd be in a similar situation where if I passed away, she would be lost. Thoughts on that? I mean, this is one of the many reasons that a family would even hire a CFP, is just to have someone know your finances as well as the one that manages it. But what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have clients that aren't acting CFPs, but have the CFP certification and have hired me as their advisor for that very reason, because they handle the finances. They love doing the finances, but they want to make sure that in the event something happened to them, their spouse already has an established relationship when they're going through maybe this big transition. They're not also trying to figure out, well, who's going to help me with this? They already know, oh, this is the first person I call.
I mean, think about it. I don't even know how to say this, but within the world of finance, everyone looks the same, and yet their character is very different. Their competence is very different. Their approach is very different. All right. And if you are strong financially, you probably have some strong opinions about who you would invite in to give direction to your finances. Imagine if you were involved and now your spouse, who's not strong financially, now has to make that really, really important decision. Whose voice are you going to allow into directing your finances? I think the one that's, in the couple, the one that's financially strong would want to say in that. And by the way, along the way, hoping that you live a very long life, you get all the strategy and all the recommendations and all the assistance that comes from having that CFP on your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, I have seen some pretty poor advice before someone has come to see me that they're then trying to unscramble. A lot of times that's because they're getting advice maybe in a vacuum and not looking at the full picture of how does this distribution impact my taxes? Does this make sense for me to do? Are there other options I have? And so, I think already having a relationship lined up with someone who has your back, sees things the way that you do, but also again, looking at it from a comprehensive approach is really important.
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the reasons why you don't make big decisions early after this is you're very vulnerable. And if you're in a vulnerable state and feel like I've got to make some financial decisions and end up going to the wrong person who's not a fiduciary or not a good steward or doesn't take the right approach, oh boy, you can really get yourself backwards. All right. So now let's get into the meat of it. What does she do? I mean, she basically said, I'm lost. What should I do? And you already said, don't make any huge decisions, but there is some benefit in doing some things and starting some things. She's not the primary in the finances, but she is now. So making sure that you've got the right guide, the right advice, or the right advisor and planner and approach. But what else? What other things need to be handled or taken care of when you're suddenly single?
The very first thing I think of in Lori's situation in particular, I think she mentioned she's 58. So, is Lori retired? Does she want to be retired? I think starting to craft what is important to Lori is really important. So what are her goals? They might look different than what their combined goals were. A lot of times when I have a client who's lost a spouse, maybe they want to move and be closer to kids or grandkids, or again, their job, if they're working, maybe that looks a little bit different. So I think helping Lori or whoever that person is figure out what is important to them, because now we have our guide of kind of moving everything else in order of that, right?
Yeah, I would, while that's critically important, I would also leave room for, hey, that might change, right?
Yeah,
because
definitely.
certainly, the everything is in flux, but you got to you do need to know, sort of, where are you going? Even if it's super unclear, what do you know? What are you feeling right now? Yeah, completely agree. I didn't think about access to money. At age 58, you might realize, if you're a geek like us, age 58 is not age 59 and a half. And so what does that mean? Lori, are you still working? Do you need to supplement that income? If so, where are there resources? If there are resources, either from life insurance or non-retirement dollars, fantastic. If there aren't, then you're going to have a choice to make with inheriting any, or choosing how you're going to inherit your deceased spouse's IRA. You might want to leave it as an inherited IRA and not move it into your own name. Okay, sorry, Amy, for going deep on this, but because you can withdraw dollars from a deceased or inherited IRA without having a early withdrawal penalty. But once you turn 59 and a half, believe it or not, you can then say, okay, I changed my mind. I know I took my husband's IRA as an inherited IRA. Now I want to take it as my own. And so you can make this is one of the unique rules within the tax code. You can make a decision and then change your mind. And oftentimes you would in that situation. Anything else to add to that complicated strategy? Try to do a flyover, but little.
And that's the exact example of why you need to have someone help you navigate that. Because in the last 2 years, I've seen 2 examples where the advice, and not by us, was, oh, you need access to money, just move it to the bank. And then it was fully taxable all at once. Yeah. Seen that twice.
Oh my! What about tax planning? What about tax issues? What needs to be attended to there when you're dealing with the loss of a spouse?
Yeah, taxes are a huge one. So depending on what year we're looking at, if it's a year that the spouse has passed away, we're filing a joint tax return. So even if they passed away at the very beginning of the year, as long as they were alive during that calendar year, we still have a joint tax return. If it's the following year, there's a good likelihood, if there's not any dependent kids, that we're looking at a single tax year.
Which means single tax rates and less standard deduction, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. So if Lori's still working, potentially we need to make some pretty big adjustments to withholdings to make sure she's not in for a big tax surprise. She mentioned she got a refund this last year, but just making sure there's not a big tax bill due the following year. Or there's opportunities potentially to look at Roth conversion, so taking some of those pre-tax dollars and moving them over to Roth. The extent that we might be able to do that might depend on their tax picture, right? Is it a joint return? Is it a single return? What does that future lifetime taxes look like for Lori if we're doing a conversion that helps us guide on how much we might want to consider doing.
Yeah. Right. So Lori mentioned I didn't really do anything in that first year and I just did my taxes. And not that, you did anything wrong. However, in that first year, there are some really big tax decisions. And right when we say don't make big tax decisions, but tax planning opportunities, I'll say that, even though it sounds awful to say opportunity in this circumstance. Roth conversion, right? If this is your last year filing a joint tax return, maybe do some Roth conversion to fill up some low tax brackets. Also, maybe there's earned income that year, but there's not going to be any earned income in the future. So contributing to a Roth IRA, contributing to retirement plans, and maybe you've got some resources from life insurance to do that. So there's some opportunities from a tax standpoint, even right away.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So what else? You talked about goals, which is sort of retirement planning. And so, keep going.
I'm going to elaborate on that too. I think having that guide helps us because, to your point, it's probably going to change. Even my clients who feel very confident in what their retirement's going to look like, goals change over time. That's exactly why we need something that's adjustable from a planning standpoint. But I think having that guide of what's important to whoever we're working with helps us figure out things like with the investments. Is the investment strategy still the right strategy, right? Is it, well, we weren't going to touch these dollars for 5 years, but now we're starting to touch them next year? Are we taking too much risk with short-term dollars? Or, in Lori's situation, maybe she's not as comfortable with taking risk as her spouse was, or vice versa. So just really making sure the investments are structured in a way that makes sense for Lori is very important.
Yeah. And then the last two areas, if you're familiar with the 6 areas of financial planning, the last two, these tend to get overlooked a little bit. The estate plan, maybe not so much, but managing risk and insurances. This is something that many people just ignore or don't think needs to be attended to.
Health insurance jumped out to me under protection planning. If Lori's 58, she's not eligible for Medicare yet. And so, does she have an employer that she has benefits through? If she doesn't, she might have gone from being on her spouse's employer plan all of a sudden to not knowing necessarily what to do for health insurance. Cobra might be an option, but might be an expensive option. Yeah. So helping figure out, how do we bridge that gap potentially until Medicare age? Life insurance is a big one. Is there anyone dependent financially on Lori? Do we need to reevaluate either maybe she has insurance she doesn't need anymore, or maybe she has a new need for insurance she didn't have before?
Well, for example, this and at 58, these are times when you're making decisions about long-term care insurance. Mm-hmm. And if you're suddenly single, that first primary caregiver is now not there. And so you've got to make some big decisions there. And updating the estate plan, eventually, maybe, again, not immediately, but because there should be clauses in there that if this person is deceased or unable, then the responsibilities and assets flow a certain way. But you are going to want to get that updated.
And a lot of times, bank accounts, house, they might be owned jointly. So then if your spouse passes away, you now own them individually. And so my mind always goes to probate. Are there some things we need to do to adjust that plan so we don't have assets passing through probate if we don't need them to?
Awful circumstance. And there's 7 major life transitions that almost everyone will go through. And the last one is if you are married, it's unlikely you're going to pass away at the exact same time. And so finding yourself suddenly single, there are some things that you can be doing all along the way, intentionally structuring your finances in a way so that if and when that occurs, you're more prepared. But as Amy just shared, a lot of things that need to be attended to in your financial life. Make sure you've got the right guide ahead of time. Make sure that you're taking the right approach, looking at all 6 areas of your financial life. Work with your certified financial planner on that. If you don't have a CFP on your team, you can contact one on our team. Find us online, wisemoneyshow.com, Korhorn.com as well. It's Korhorn with a K, or give us a call, 574-247-5898. All right, there you have it. Go out and take your next wise step in your financial life.